Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut, and I am so thrilled to see so many of you here in the audience with us this evening for what I know is going to be a wonderful discussion about this wonderful book, Swordstone Table, which we're going to talk about more in just a moment. I'm not going to stay on for too long. I know you're not here to hear me talk, but I do have a little bit of stuff I wanted to share with you. First of all, again, thank you for being here. Your support and enthusiasm has really been so crucial to us throughout the pandemic and continues to be so, and will continue to be so moving forward. So we're glad to see so many old friends and so many new friends here tonight. So you're on Crowdcast, and some of you have joined us in Crowdcast before. Maybe some of you are new. I'll just take a moment to point out to you some of the features of Crowdcast. I see you're already using the chat, which is one of the really fun features, and one of the neat things that, when you're in an auditorium, you can't sit and chat with other people. You have to be quiet, but you can continue to chat throughout the program, and we welcome that. But at the end of our program this evening, we're going to have a Q&A session, and if you do have a question for anybody on the panel tonight, rather than put that in the chat, if you could do us a favor and put it down in the Ask a Question area that you see at the bottom of your screen, that will help us out a lot. That makes it a lot easier for us to manage that part. And another thing you can do is look at what other people have asked. And if you have the same question, you can click to upvote it and add your voice to those that want to hear an answer to that question. So we look forward to that part of the program very much. Also, you see in the chat a link, an opportunity to purchase a copy of Swordstone Table, an autographed copy via bookplate. And we know, we're no dummies. We know you can buy this book anywhere else. But if you purchase it through us, first of all, you do get that signed copy, which is not the case all the time. And you also have the benefit of knowing that your purchase supports the Mark Twain House and Museum, which is very important to us, and we appreciate it very, very much. So I hope you'll take advantage of that opportunity, and we'll be reposting that link a number of times throughout the program. While we're talking about support, I want to draw your attention, if I may, to that long green button below my face right now that says your support is vital to the Mark Twain House and Museum. It's been quite a wild ride for the Mark Twain House and Museum, as for so many other organizations all over the world. We are a private, nonprofit organization. Our main source of revenue is our earned income, especially our guided house tour. We're thrilled that we've been able to offer that for the past couple of months after having not been able to offer it for much of the past year. And it's been really exciting to see people coming in droves to our Mark Twain's house. So if you ever have a chance to come do that, visit us in Hartford, please do. But I mentioned all this by way of saying that it's been fiscally challenging for us, and everybody who has donated to us during this period has been a real help to us and really buoyed our spirits and buoyed our pocketbooks. I want to let you know that every single penny that you are able to donate is deeply appreciated by the staff and the Board of Trustees, and it's put to very, very good use. So if you are able, and I know not everybody is, to help us out in that way, please do, and know that it is very much appreciated. So that's all the housekeeping. I want to move on now to introducing tonight's guests. But first, I want to thank our sponsors. Tonight's program is sponsored by the Wish You Well Foundation and by Connecticut Public, WNPR. And it's produced in part with support honoring the legacy of Frank Lord, one of our dear trustees who's recently departed. So, our moderator tonight is the awesome Professor Dorsey Armstrong. She's a specialist in medieval English literature. She joined the Purdue faculty in 2002. She currently serves as head of the English department. She has a BA in English and a creative writing from Stanford University and a PhD in medieval literature from Duke University. She's taught at a number of places. Her research interests include medieval women writers, late medieval print culture, and the Arthurian legend, on which she has published extensively. In 2009, she became editor-in-chief of the academic journal Arthuriana, which publishes the most cutting-edge research on the legend of King Arthur from its medieval origins to its enactments in the present moment. And how perfect is that for our topic tonight? So I'm going to welcome Dorsey in just a moment. I also want to welcome the editors of this wonderful anthology. Swapna Krishna covers space, tech, and pop culture at outlets such as Engadget, StarTrek.com, The Verge, and more. You can find her on Twitter at @skrishna. And Jenn Northington is a former bookseller and a current reviewer, podcaster, and editor. She's been published in various places, including Selfish Magazine and Book Riot. And after they've spoken for a little bit, we are going to be welcoming some of the authors who've contributed to this anthology: Nisi Shawl, Daniel Lavery, and Alexander Chee. And I'm sorry to report that Maria Davahna Headley, who was originally supposed to be part of our group tonight, is unable to join us. And we're very sorry to not have her here with us this evening. So Dorsey, Jenn, and Swapna, welcome. It's so great to have you here this evening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure.
And you'll call me back up when it's time to help with the Q&A?
I will.
All right then. Well,
and if I don't, somebody text me and let me know that I've missed my cue.
Oh, you can count on it. I will be on it. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy with the rest of the audience and have fun. I'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thanks to you, Jenn and Swapna, for not only being here tonight, but for producing this amazing collection of stories. It really is true what you say in the introduction, that the stories blow your mind and they knock your socks off, and every one is better than the last, it seems. And I have to say that in a year where the stress of the pandemic and so much else happening in our society made it almost impossible for me to focus on a story or a novel, reading these stories was like a balm to the soul. And I cannot wait to teach this collection the next time I teach Arthurian literature. And I always say that every age writes the King Arthur that it needs. So the King Arthur in the 15th century looks like what an ideal 15th century king would have looked like. The Welsh early King Arthur looks much more like what the Welsh would have thought is a great tribal leader. And here we have, with perfect timing, this collection that provides us with new voices, voices that have been obscured, that retells stories from other points of view. And I just want to know, how did this idea come to you? And what was the process like? And how did you select? You say in your introduction that you were thrilled so many people said yes. So you're obviously, like I am, voracious readers of all things Arthurian. But tell me a little bit how the collection came to be.
Yeah, so back in like 2018, 1,000 years ago, we were getting so many new retellings of various stories. You know, we were getting Greek mythology and we were getting Shakespeare and we were getting all of these different things. And I was like, where is King Arthur? Because I've been a King Arthur nerd for a good long time. I did history in college and have read a ton of Arthurian retellings. But I was like, oh, where are the current ones? And since then, we have seen a bunch, which is so exciting. But at that point, I was just not sure where to find them. And I thought, well, maybe other people want them as well. And Swapna and I had known each other for a while. And one of the ways that we had bonded was over our mutual love for Mary Stewart's Merlin series, which is, you know, one of the touch points of retellings for us. And I said to her, do you think people would be interested? And also, would you do this with me? Because I don't want to do it by myself. And she said yes, which was amazing.
Yep. Yeah, I was like, I don't know if other people want it, but I want it, so I am in. And as far as, you know, reaching out to people and selecting authors, like you pointed out, Dorsey, we both read pretty widely, and we approached it not with we approached it not with kind of the idea of collecting stories, but instead collecting authors, approaching the authors that we love and that we admire and that we are fans of. Like, as we're fans of the legend, we are also fans of these authors in this collection. And so we approached the people we love and wanted to see what they would do with the legend, basically.
Fantastic. What I really like about this collection is that it is so diverse in just about every sense of the word, right? You have the Arthurian legend in the present, in the future on Mars, in settings that look very much like the original medieval setting or pretend to be medieval-ish. And then at the same time, you have this coherence. And part of the coherence comes from, I think, the diversity and the commitment of all the authors to telling an amazing story. And one thing I really liked in your introduction is you made the point that the stories resonate with each other, which I noticed over and over again as I was reading, that I see a connection back to a previous story, or I'm thinking about this thing now because this author said it. And now when I read this next story, I'm going to see it in a whole new way. And I love when you say these stories have cousins and siblings the authors aren't even aware of. And I thought that was a fantastic way to put it, that it's like a big family of stories. When you were putting this collection together, did you give the authors any guidance at all, or did you just turn the authors you had collected loose?
There were some minimal guidances, yeah, just a little bit here and there. Like, we knew we wanted cross genre, so we talked to Asma Zehanat Khan about having some crime elements in her story. We talked to Sylvia Moreno Garcia about including some sci-fi, and we did ask Maria Davahna Headley to make sure Mordred was in there, because by the time she came on, we realized we had no Mordred stories, and I personally was like, I have to have at least one Mordred story in there. But other than that, no, we really were just like, what characters are you interested in? What settings, right? Like, it all happened pretty organically.
Fantastic. And I love that you mentioned Maria's story, Mayday, which I have read 5 times so far. And I keep finding additional Easter eggs, I call them, as I read. And I'm so sorry she couldn't be with us tonight, but the story of Mordred, most of you are probably familiar, but in the Arthurian legend, he is King Arthur's incestuously conceived son and nephew. And in the legend, it's one of the moments after his birth where Arthur does something that has troubled scholars and readers of the legend for centuries, in which he is told that a child that was born on May Day will be the undoing of his kingdom. And so to solve that problem, he takes all the babies that were born on May Day and puts them in a boat and drives it out to sea. And of course, in the way of all prophecies, the one person he needs to get rid of is the one person who survives, and then grows up to destroy the kingdom. But yes, I love the variety and the fact that upon each reading of these stories, more and more seems to come to the surface every time one reads them. And it's different if you've read the last story in the collection and then go back and read the first, or dip in and out. Can I ask you, do you plan to do a second volume, perhaps?
I would love to. We have no active plans right now. We're still focused on this one, but I think we've both commented again and again. We could do 10, 20 of these and not cover the breadth of the anthology or the breadth of the legend, because there's just so much.
Right. The Arthurian legend is unusual in the way that from its earliest beginnings, as it's moved on from the 6th century forward, it seems to act like a giant magnet and attract other stories to it. So the story of Sir Tristan was originally its own thing, and then eventually someone said, oh, let's just make him a knight of King Arthur so we can include all his adventures as well. And so I love the fact that the Arthurian legend accretes to it all these different interpretations over the centuries, and it doesn't show any signs of stopping, which, thank goodness. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if we could take a second, I'd like to bring in some of the authors who contributed to this collection and really dig in and find out what they were thinking and how they were inspired to write these stories. So can we bring in Daniel and Alexander and Nisi? Thank you for joining us. The introduction for the three of you could take the rest of this hour, so I will keep it short, but let me just say, for those of you who don't know, Daniel Lavery is a contributor to Slate magazine in the form of Dear Prudence, the advice column, and I feel like I have known you for years because I've been reading that column, and also your work on The Toast, of which you are a core founder. Chee, Alexander Chee is a best-selling author with so many works it would take too long to list them here, but he has published in the Best American Essays, New York Times Magazine. He's the winner of several awards and an associate professor at Dartmouth. And Nisi Shawl is quite famous for her series of collections of fiction and also her edition of Writing the Other, a practical approach, which has been used at many college campuses in order to approach the issue of how we use inclusive language when we write. Her work focuses on gender, race, and colonialism. She's been a finalist for the Nebula Awards, and a lot of her work focuses on Octavia Butler, who is one of my favorite authors. And so I'd just like to welcome all of you to the program.
Thank you. I will just take a second, not to be snarky, but to correct you. I don't use she and her.
My apologies. And boy, that's embarrassing. In a talk about diversity and inclusion. Good job. All right. Well, let's wait and see. That's all right. No, it needs to happen. And while we're talking about that, one thing I loved about your story, I Being Young and Foolish, is that it is a take on the story of Nimue and Merlin, or Nineveh in Merlin, in which that story that usually is about how the Nimue character is conniving, she's sneaky, she wants to imprison Merlin in the earth to take his power, that character is reluctant, that she is fighting against her destiny in a way while also coming to meet it. And the character has become a Ugandan albino sorceress with one of my favorite characters in this whole collection, the non-binary cat Oda. Really, if I had to pick a single character, that would be my favorite. And what I really love about this story is how time and space is so malleable, that rooms and places change shape, change dimension, staircases appear, disappear, and also the when can change. So you have views of the Arthurian world that are in the future or in the past. And I'm just wondering if you could share with us how you came to pick this particular story in the Arthurian legend as your inspiration.
I had long identified with Nimue and been really pissed off at the way that Nimue was viewed as evil and conniving. As someone who's been the other most of my life, I thought there's another side to this story. It's interesting that you mentioned the malleability of time, because this is one of the few stories, usually I write and I just write as it happens chronologically. But this time I found that I would write something and then I'd say, oh, but wait, earlier there was another scene, and I'd have to go back and write it. So I was actually jumping around in time as I wrote a story about jumping around in time.
And it's a beautiful story, beautifully written, and provides this view of Arthur's kingdom, what it would look like for someone who would be considered a true outsider, but who then is welcomed into the kingdom, is brought into the kingdom, and who is in some ways intelligible, but in others not, to the residents of that kingdom. And again, I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to give away the ending, but I am so pleased with your explanation as to how Merlin ends up where he does. And I'm not going to say anything else. So the rest of you will have to read the book to see how this turns out. I thought it was a brilliant conclusion to that story, and now my preferred ending.
Thank you. I think it's how it really happened.
I tend to agree. Moving on, I want to open this up to a conversation to all of us in just a moment, but I'd just like to touch briefly on each contributor's story. Daniel Lavery wrote the story entitled How After Long Fighting Galahad Was Overcome by Lancelot Yet Was Not Slain and Made Great Speed to Yield to Friendship, or Galahad, the Knight of the Forfeit. And the second I saw that title, as a scholar who specializes in Malory, I immediately recognized it as being an allusion, or actually just a clear imitation of William Caxton's chapter titles for Malory from his 1485 print, in which he gets rid of most of the suspense of the story that's about to come by telling you what's about to come. But at the same time, you don't do that here. It's still a story full of surprises. And what I was really struck by here is one of the fundamental contradictions of the Arthurian tradition, which is that it celebrates a community that is peaceful and ordered. But the way that community is peaceful and ordered is through the mechanism of violence. And also one of the foundational pillars of that society is the bromances, the relationships among knights. The homosocial bonding is what holds it together. And I was wondering if you could talk about why this aspect of the story.
Yeah, thank you so much for the mention of the Malory illusion. I loved those titles. I grew up on the Malory stories, as well as the later Lancelot Grails and the Knight of the Cart and all of that. So I have often had a real fondness for that kind of long and involved title. I find that really delightful. But yes, as you say, the stories are one of accretion over time, and that's sort of how the court functions as well. I grew up on a lot of sort of boys' own adventures versions of both Robin Hood and the Knights of the Round Table, and one of the really common themes seemed to be this incredible readiness to fight anyone who so much as crosses your path. But the second the fight is over, to be just delighted. Oh, you beat me, that's wonderful. Be my best friend now. And this sort of delight in being bested was something that often interested me and seemed to function as part of that sort of accretion and peeling off that you find. And particularly, Galahad is a character who sort of fell out of the canon over time and is now usually, if you hear his name, people usually think, you're trying to say Galahad and messing it up. So he is not someone who has stood the test of time in quite the same way. But that felt very much like the type of character who could really exemplify that aspect of the legends that always interested me.
And I have to say, I was so delighted. And I sort of did an eye skip when I read the title, and my brain filled in Galahad. And then I went back and I said, oh no, it's this guy who's just here for a little bit. And there are so many characters who show up for just a little bit. They do something important and then they disappear. And this collection goes a long way towards trying to explore what's the backstory of those characters and what happened to them afterward and where did they go? And why were they there to start with, only to be forgotten or discarded? And what I really like about this story as well is the way you use language. You move between this very beautiful style to dialogue that is right out of yesterday. So someone says, okay, let's go. But one of the lines I really love, and you're talking about the figure of Lancelot, who is, the knight par excellence. When you say the number of the Trinity is 3 and perfect, Lancelot is and is and is. And I really, really enjoyed that line and so much of the rest of the writing. And I also want to let people know that if you are a fan of early Arthurian legend, especially the Welsh texts, I think you've done an amazing job of alluding to those with your lists. Can you talk a little bit about the lists?
Gosh, thank you so much. I feel like so much of my work is all about operating within the context of pastiche. And so I just feel deeply, deeply seen by this reading. I'm very moved. Thank you very much. Yes, I also, without ever having read anything in the original, because I can't read any other language than English, I'm afraid. But I often spent as much time as I could trying to read back in the earliest translations that I could find. It also feels, of course, quite biblical. I grew up reading those books as well, and lists. I think lists are such a fabulous way to denote something really, really particular and useful. I think of, especially in Bleak House, all the little names of the birds that end with spinach, gammon, and death. Mrs. Flight's birds. I'm getting off into Dickens now, but yeah, I think there's so much that can be done in a list. And a list can sort of break your heart and inform you, and do a great deal in a relatively short amount of time. So that's often a tool that I use, especially if I'm going for a sort of, older medieval or more biblical sounding style. So that was very much a pleasure to get to do.
It was fantastic to read. And I think perhaps the main theme of this story could be summed up by your statement that the true knight longs for shame, which is sort of the deeper meaning underneath what looks like constant attempts to secure honor and valor, but actually on a lower level, it's the shame that allows you to have the true relationship with one of your fellow knights.
Yeah, I think of Galahote as like a humiliation-seeking device. His problem is he's too glorious, he's too gorgeous, he's too rich, he's too good-looking. Everyone falls before his sword too easily until he encounters the Round Table, and then at that point, it becomes really apparent. I think even in the original text that he's been putting this huge war machine into motion, in part because he just wants to find somebody who's going to be able to top him.
Yeah,
and I think he does. I think he gets that.
He does. Oh, he absolutely does. I want to move on now to Alexander Chee, who is a best-selling author of so many texts. And I gave out a little gasp of delight when I saw the title of this story, that it was on Mars and that it was a retelling of the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And I thought to myself, someone should have done this sooner. Once I saw it, I thought, this is absolutely brilliant. This is what someone should be doing with the Gawain story, the Little Green Men. And for those listening who aren't familiar with it, but I imagine most of you are, the poem of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a medieval poem in which a mysterious green stranger appears at Arthur's court, and he asks, could someone do him the favor of chopping off his head? And the character of Sir Gawain finally agrees to do it. And then the Green Knight puts his head back on, rides on out, and gives Gawain a year and a day to find him and accept a similar blow in return. And here we take, you're a professor of English. I imagine you've taught this many times. Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration for this story? And especially, I imagine when you teach it to undergrads, when they reach the section of the exchange of winnings. Can you talk a little bit about that and how here it's alluded to in the medieval poem, but here you really, really bring it front and center?
So I just want to, I do teach English, but I don't teach that kind of English. I am not, as they call it, an early modernist or I teach creative writing. I'm part of the mongrel crew that teaches people to write new things. But I do have an early modernist old library. One of my colleagues was leaving the office that I moved into, and he left behind all these books, and he's going to have a bookstore come and take them away. And I was like, absolutely do not. Like, I'm sorry for the bookstore, but I'm going to keep this motley collection of books, because it was all these kinds of everything from Spencer to like all these things that I just actually didn't read as much of when I was younger that I really should have. But I was an Arthur nut as a kid, played D&D, was in a coven, all these kinds of formative experiences around mysticism and myth, and also really into science fiction. The thing that I love about the Green Knight story is how queer it is.
Yes.
Like on its own, you don't actually have to do that much to like make it even queerer. Once Gawain gets to the Green Knight's castle, the knight tells him like, you have to give me everything that you find here. And so when the Green Knight's wife kisses him, he then greets the Green Knight with a kiss. So there's all these kinds of things that were just sort of waiting. And so as I was thinking about like, how do I remake this in some way, I was also just like incredibly, writing last year was, I felt like a needle going through a leather wallet. Like my head just felt like it was always under this kind of horrible pressure. And our wonderful editors were incredibly patient with me as I struggled my way through. And I just thought like, why don't, I kept thinking, I had been writing about Mars anyway, and thinking about how whenever people fantasize about a Mars mission, they always imagine it's going to be like one international mission that will get there. And actually right now there's like a handful, like in real life, there's a handful of private missions that are trying to get their act together. One of them asks you to sign up for a reality show about colonizing Mars also. And so I just sort of investigated all of these Mars missions and then imagined a Mars future where like all of them get there and it's chaos. And like, and you have like no particularly coordinated effort, just like lots of graft and selfishness kind of like we have here now. And so it was fun to play with like celebrity and reality TV and
I have to say I was delighted that Bjork's granddaughter was a character. That was one of the favorite moments that helps us locate, when in time this is happening. 2052. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, my apologies to her whenever she finally appears. But I hope she enjoys the story if she can still find it at that time. So yeah, I just thought like, I thought of all of these parties that I wrote about actually in my second novel, The Queen of the Night, where people would get dressed up in costumes and enact these different scenes, and there would be like tableau vivants and games and little shows, and I thought this is going to be what I want to set on Mars.
When I teach that poem that you took as your inspiration, as you say, there's this exchange of winnings where Gawain stays home in the castle and he has to give the Green Knight, who doesn't realize is the Green Knight at that point, anything he gets that day. And the Lord of the Castle's wife keeps coming in to Gawain's bedchamber where he's trapped under the sheets because he sleeps naked and he can't get out. And she keeps trying to seduce him. And he refuses. He's very honorable. He's not going to sleep with his host's wife, but he will accept a kiss or he will give her a kiss, and that's it. And I ask my students all the time, so what if Gawain gives in? What does he give to the host at the end of the day? And you can see the light bulb go off and all the students go, oh. Is that on purpose? I said, yes, it's on purpose. It's not an accident. People in the 14th century understood this just like we do today. They just had different ways of talking about it. So that was one thing I really liked, that you were able to take that story and then surface even more than we can see in the original version, what the tensions are there and how the conclusion could go. While we still have some time, I would like to open it up to a general discussion amongst all of us. And actually, this first question, I would like to hear from the authors, not the editors. You're not allowed to answer this question. Which story in this collection, besides your own and besides that of the other panelists here, was your favorite, and why?
My favorite was Silvia Moreno Garcia's.
And can you tell us why?
Because it snuck up on me, because it wasn't what I expected, and yet it was deliciously appropriate.
What about the others of you?
Gosh, it's really hard to pick one, but I do think Mayday would be a strong contender.
That story is so fascinating in the way that it is the kind of story where you're looking over the shoulder of someone. So it's a list of contents from a specific site that are going up for auction. And it's incumbent upon the reader to try and make the connections between those different elements that are included in the auction and figure out how they fit into the Arthurian story. And that story, it's quite appropriate to be talking about that when we're with the Mark Twain house, because Twain, of course, famously took a 19th century American and sent him back to Camelot. And in this case, the characters of the Arthurian legend are transported into the Chicago Gold Coast in the 19th century, which is a really fascinating twist on Twain's own idea about the story. Alexander, do you have a favorite? Or are you not able to pick one, which is also a fair answer?
I'm just behind in my reading. I haven't had the chance to read very far into the collection. I read Nisi's because they're a legend, and I read Daniel's because I know Daniel and was a guest. So I'm definitely caught up with. I think probably. I mean, I definitely love. I do wish Maria was here because I love the Nimue story so much. So I can't fairly say that I have read all of the stories and I know which one is the best. But yeah, that's, it was I taught all year and then in June I just fell down onto my floor.
I think that's the universal experience after the past year, making it to the end of the academic year or the school year or some break, and then everyone just collapses. And I think we're all entitled to after what's been going on. To the editors, to Swapna and Jenn, can you talk a little bit more about how these stories are in conversation with each other and how you decided, was it an organic decision to separate the sections into past, present, and future? Or did it, how did you decide on that structure? Was that something in your minds before you solicited the stories and asked for contributions?
No, so that, it's really funny because that is something that I think a lot of people have commented on, and Jenn and I are both we did definitely talk about it, and we had some conversations about how it would be organized, but it definitely was a product of the stories that came in, and we looked at the stories we had and we're like, it's an anthology, we have to organize them some way, how are we going to do it? And personally, the idea of Arthur as the once and future king, that's one of the parts of the legend that resonates with me the most. So I was a big fan of, and I'm pretty sure Anna, our editor at Penguin Random House, Anna Kaufman, also brought up that point that was a really good way to kind of organize the stories. And it was very organic. It was very much based on the stories we had and they had to be organized some way, and that fell into place.
Jenn.
Yeah, I was poking at our mammoth spreadsheet. There's an ungodly number of tabs, and I found the one where we were trying to figure out our order. and it's funny because we didn't get very far before, I can't remember who first had the idea, but oh wait, we have some past ones, we have some sort of present-ish ones, we have some future ones, Arthur's the once and future king. I think this is done. That's it. And then it was just a question of trying to arrange them inside of the sections, which went quicker than I think it could have, because, as you've mentioned, and as we talked about in the introduction, they do sort of speak to each other in these very interesting ways that I mean, none of these, at least as far as I know, none of the authors were talking to each other during the writing process. Like maybe there was like a secret group chat that I didn't know about, but yeah, it just sort of happened, that they found resonances, even though none of them were doing even remotely the same thing. And I like to think that that's a byproduct of the fact that, you know, when we were putting together a dream list of who we wanted to ask and started sending them out, you know, all of these authors, and Nisi and Alex and Daniel are all great examples of this, are working, you know, now and are in conversation now with everything that's going on in, you know, whether it's pop culture or literature or, you know, history or whatever. Like you are all working in that space and dealing with what you find there and trying to make it your own. And so it makes sense to me that those resonances would come out of, you know, playing with the same source material in a way.
And to piggyback off of that comment, you're talking about the voices and this moment in time. And I think many of us are thinking about how the past, in particular, 4 years and the last year in particular, have maybe been very upsetting in the way that voices have been silenced, that we have seen during the pandemic. I would say the pandemic allowed the ugly misogyny and racism and homophobia that has always been present in our society to suddenly be really apparent on the surface. And it was remarkable to watch this happening. And so can you speak, any of you, a little bit about the importance of using these diverse voices to retell the legend from these different perspectives with these different characters, especially at the present moment in the United States?
I was, I don't know if it's just the present moment, but I continually run into the idea that, you know, there were no Black people in the Middle Ages, you know, that everybody was like, you can't cast anybody in those roles. You just, if you're doing any kind of movie or television presentation. And so I was very consciously fighting back against that. Well, yes, actually, people got around quite a bit. And here's an example.
Yes, that is the thing that's been discussed quite a bit recently, especially in medieval studies, that there is this alt-right white supremacist view of the Middle Ages that imagines it as something that never was. And that, yes, as you say, people got around much more. DNA analysis in London and other parts of England have proven that there are people from all over the world who have traveled to Britain or are in Italy or, you know, from Northern Africa. And it was a much more diverse world and a much more, in many instances, tolerant world than what has come down to us, and how many people choose to interpret what's come down to us.
Yeah, another example of someone doing that, Nicola Griffith, in her Hild series, you know, she's got like, you know, Black clerics there, you know, they're like, they're not like an exception, they're part of the scene.
And that would have been true. It seems now, the more we revisit the history, that's not imagined or made up, that it actually was a much more diverse world than many of us have been taught. And I'm glad to see that the conversation and around this is bringing more of this diversity that already existed, always already existed, to the fore, so that we correct the impression of the Middle Ages being some white fantasy land. What about the rest of you? Any thoughts on the importance of this collection in the present moment?
I don't know that I have any particular thoughts on that so much as now, of course, you know, you have me thinking about sort of canonical examples, again, in the original stories of, you know, Sir Palamedes, the son of King Excalibur, is canonically referred to as a Saracen pagan, either somebody from somewhere near modern day Iraq or modern day Syria, who's very much a part of the story. So just so strange to think that ways in which completely understood at the time as, of course, people from various countries would be coming and going. Of course, we go other places. Would now, that somebody would attempt to claim that would have been unrealistic. It's just so strange to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Palamedes is one of my favorite characters, and I've spent a lot of time writing about him. And I still think I'm not done. He fascinates me. I think I have to do something else. Alexander, do you have any thoughts?
I spent a lot of time thinking about how our ideas of the future are as artificial as our ideas of the past.
Ooh.
I think that's an excellent point.
So much of what you're talking about with this sort of like attempt to situate a all-white medieval period, for example, is what we see also when we see science fiction, popular science fiction. Too often, less now, but certainly less with the work of Nisi Shawl. But I think I thought about that a lot when I was writing the story, trying to think through what were my own received ideas about it as someone who has consumed so much of it, Yeah. And I had read speaking of Octavia Butler, I had read Parable of the Sower, just like I taught it in fall of 2019, and was thinking about it and thinking about what a pleasure it was to read about someone who wanted to live so much in the face of such terrible things, and for all of the difficult stuff that's described in the book, the narrator is still someone who's so determined to conquer, and that also was just kind of a atmosphere.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to open it up to some of our participants who I think have some questions. And Jennifer is going to help us moderate those questions.
I am indeed. But first I have to say, life is funny. When I was a kid, I just luxuriated in the Once and Future King. I just inhaled it and read it over and over. And if you had told me that I would be being paid to sit and listen to people talk about Arthurian legend as part of my job, I never would have believed you. So thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. And yes, we have some great questions from our audience. And Cindy Lou asked one that a number of other people upvoted. Her question is, the Arthurian legend seems to be having a real moment right now. Your book, several new YA novels, and of course the Green Knight movie, all based on the Arthurian legend. Why do you think Arthur and his colleagues are so popular right now?
And his colleagues.
I know, I love that.
That's great.
Anybody want to jump on that?
I always think, there's just so much room in there. I mean, there's so many characters. There's so many interesting power dynamics and relationships. There's so many different settings. Are you going to do the Grail? Are you going to do Camelot? Are you going to do Avalon? There's so many options. And, I am not a creative writer in the way that these fine folks are, but it made sense to me as somebody who wanted to put together a collection and edit it, that there would be room to play, and that you could pull whatever themes that was that you wanted to focus on. They were already there, whether they were obscured or really visible. So I was hoping that would be true for the writers in the collection. And it seems like yes, no, I don't know.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, at the risk of being obvious, I don't think Arthur ever goes away. So I think it's more just every 5 to 10 years, there's another movie. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight was a movie in 1973. The 80s had, was it Lady Hawk? There was Excalibur.
Yes.
Yes.
There was the Fisher King. Back in the early 80s, there was a
Yeah.
version of Parsifal. In the 50s, there was Prince Valiant and Camelot, obviously. So I think there's every 5 or 10 years at least, there's a new collection, or there's a new retelling, or there's a new movie. And so I think actually the more you kind of dive into it, the more that you find it's every
Yeah.
Are,
And again-
are we allowed to mention Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
Yes. Yes.
So not only the best Arthurian movie ever made, but perhaps the best medieval movie ever made.
Okay. I mean, I felt like kind of a jerk bringing it up, but I'm glad you.
It's a favorite of mine. So
It stands up. How many decades later?
Right?
It holds up.
Well, thank you for that, and maybe we can revisit that. There's another awesome question, this one from Brendan Anderson, who says, I love how all three of your works, meaning, and I think Nisi, Alexander, and Daniel, explore sexuality, an aspect of the legend that has been so thoroughly subdued by Tennyson Victorianism that many people today are surprised to find that not all knights are as chaste as Galahad, as reflected by the recent reviews of The Green Knight. I'm curious what drew you to explore that topic and why you went the direction you did. I think it's a really good point.
Well, again, it was inherent in the material, just not, dwelt upon.
Yeah.
I mean, Nimue was seducing Merlin. So, yeah, all I had to do was keep the camera focused on that red linen covered bed.
I think there's, I already said that, I talked about the queerness and the Green Knight, but also I don't know, it's so artificial to take sex out, actually, which I think is more often the case, really, as the questioner mentions, things are subdued previously, we in creative writing classes, we talk a lot about what does the character want, and sex, yeah, I mean, not always, but it is often, shall we say, a part of it. I don't. I'm one of the things I would say I'm more aware of now, especially after the last few years, is the choice that people make to be asexual, and I do not want to, or even, I shouldn't say choice. Some people find themselves that way, and I don't want to also overdo the sex part of things, but I think, I think of my story as being actually a very romantic, sort of chaste story, given what's in the tale, what it could have been.
Yeah. I do want to give a little bit more credit to the Victorians. I think of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood and the incredibly erotic, paintings of, for example, the Lady of Shalott. It's just a bunch of incredibly gorgeous, strong-jawed women lounging around, wrapping scarves around themselves, staring into the mirror, just being if someone doesn't come deal with me in this castle right now, I will lose it and die. So I do think that there's a certain element of erotic awareness in at least some of the Victorian approaches to Arthuriana. But yes, absolutely. The overall point, I think really the 20th century and that sort of swords and sandals epic often, did away with any sort of sexuality and resolved it into sort of a momentary kiss before running off to do a lot of sexless fighting. So I absolutely take the greater point about for a long time there has been less of a focus on that. Although I do think the 70s and 80s, if nothing else, the She-Devils of Morgan Le Fay, the 1971 erotic film about Morgan Le Fay, undoes some of that. But very much again, a story of Galahad has everything to do with eroticizing knighthood, the whole situation of it, and that was something that struck me as fairly interesting. This idea that it was a constantly eroticized activity and vocation, and obviously their interest in observing minute rules of courtly love and who you should be in love with and how you should be in love with them and how public you should make it and how much you should let everyone else know about what kind of sex you were having or hoping to have. It's very, very much present, very much interested me.
And that was
Now I want to write a story about the She-Devils.
of Morgan Le Fay. Thank you. I had no idea.
We're all taking notes, like, okay.
Googling now.
I have to say that reading these stories and then talking to you, but first when I was reading them, it made me want to go back to my undergraduate degree, which is in English and creative writing. And originally I was going to be a professor just so I could pay the bills and write my books. And it's been the longest time since I have felt actually inspired to maybe do something more creative. And I think that's a great gift when stories and books can inspire you, not just to think about things in a different way, but also motivate you to want to participate in that conversation. And I want to apologize again to Nisi for misusing the pronouns. No, I am horrified, but also this makes the point even better than I could have if I had wanted to, that we need to keep having this conversation and we need to keep sharing stories like this and we need to keep broadening the discussion. And so I'm just so pleased that this collection is coming out, that it is so brilliant, that I get to teach it the next time I teach Arthurian Lit. I can dispense with Marion Zimmer Bradley's Mists of Avalon, get that out of the way. And move on to this. Yeah, students come to me and they tell me about this amazing book. And I'm like, so thank you for continuing to participate in the development of the Legend of Arthur. One of my favorite things about it is that so much happens for reasons that are unknown. There's a stone, and if you throw water on it, there'll be a storm, and then a night will come and we'll fight you. Why? Just cause. Do you want to cross this river? You have to fight this knight. Why? Because he's there to fight you. And so all of those moments where you wonder, why on earth is this the rule? Where do these rules come from? Allows us to probe a little bit deeper if we can use our imaginations to try and understand what might be behind that. What are the reasons that throwing water on a stone means this poor knight has to ride out of his castle all the time and fight whoever did it?
Well, that sounded like kind of wrapping up, and that was awesome. But I do want to. There's one more question from the audience, and then I have a couple more things that I want to say. Do you all have just a few more minutes to stick around? Because Dr. Mark Mayberry, who's one of our trustees, and he's just such a great and supportive trustee and takes part in a lot of our programs, asks or says, the discussion of science fiction makes me wonder, are there video games that embody the classic stories, enabling interacting with these Arthurian characters? Do any of you have any experience with that?
I mean, you have Swapna who writes a column about video games.
Yeah. Weird, but given me this video game, I have, as far as I know, there's nothing King Arthur. I think there was a video game based on the 2003 Clive Owen King Arthur movie, but I've never played it. I've heard it exists. But I don't think I know of any King Arthur video games.
What a huge oversight.
I know. I'm like, now I want to play it. Let's
Yes, I would totally be playing one.
There actually are a few. There's an old 83 Atari game called Excalibur. It's actually one of three video games called Excalibur. There's also Excalibur 2555 AD and Excalibur Morgana's Revenge. There's a few just named King Arthur. There's Galahad and the Holy Grail. There's Chronicles of the Sword, Conquest of Camelot, Dark Age of Camelot. They're not necessarily very popular games that you would see around very often, but they are there. And I remember Quest for Camelot, the 1998 video game tie-in to the terrible animated Warner Brothers movie.
Yeah,
very compelling as a 12-year-old.
Wow. Well, Daniel reported that his battery is about to die and he might disappear. I'm so glad you got to contribute that before we lost you. So thank you. Right?
Absolutely. If it was on the Game Boy printer, I played it.
I'm ready for the RPG though. I'm ready for the King Arthur RPG.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of the possibilities.
Yeah, I'm ready
You could
for it.
be any knight. You could be Morgan Le Fay. You could be a minor knight. You could bring Galahad back into the action.
Yeah, right. Oh man.
Well, we did lose Daniel, and
Yep.
I want to ask Jenn. I just learned that people who order a signed copy of this book actually get a bonus a sticker. Can you show us what people get?
It's so shiny.
I know, and we don't have any left.
No.
Like Jenn and I was like, that's why I was like, I don't even think I have any more. And so they're a rare and precious
And it says
commodity.
Camelot or bust. That's
Sure does.
awesome. So
Custom designed for us by the amazing Alice Tam, who is a friend and a very talented illustrator. And yes, I believe we sent you some. Yes, we did send you some, hopefully.
I think so.
And other bookstores that we have done events with also have them, but we are completely out. So if you want one, you have to get your book from an independent bookstore, like the Mark Twain House. Which,
from us. There are no other independent bookstores.
That's
just
right.
us.
Only Mark Twain House. There you go.
Oh my gosh, what a delightful conversation. I want to say, we were talking a little bit about Mark Twain and Connecticut Yankee, and one of the things I always like to point out is that the Mark Twain House is a writer's home and a home for writers, and I want you all to feel now part of our community of writers. Now that you've done this program, show me, has anybody been to the Twain House? Any of you been? Okay, we're going to remedy that. We'd love to have you all come visit us, and who knows what's going to happen in the next couple months with COVID, but the house has been there for a really long time and will be there for a really long time. So yes, right. So I hope you'll come see us. I hope you'll stay in touch and continue. We'd love to have you back again. And Swapna and Jenn, congratulations on your book. What an amazing accomplishment. And you have to know, especially during this time, that you're really giving people something to dive into and to take pleasure in. So, and Nisi and Alexander, thank you so much for being here with us and being so generous with your time and your insights. And thank you to our audience. What an amazing audience with great, great questions. And thank you to my colleague, Jacques Lamar, who's been chatting people up in the chat and keeping that rolling. So let's do it again soon. And best of luck to all of you, and stay in touch, please.
Thank you. And Dorsey, thank you so much.
Oh,
Dorsey,
I am eagerly awaiting volume 2 and 3 and 4. I think you have to do this.
Yes. And Dorsey, thank you. You've been an amazing moderator, and thank you for doing this with us. And again, you're part of the family too. So please come see us, and you'll love it.
It's absolutely my pleasure, especially to get to talk to people whose stories really made me feel something and really made me feel excited and inspired, and also in some way comforted. Literature helps us survive very difficult times. And I just want to say again that the stories in this collection were really marvelous in that respect. And so I feel honored and privileged to have had the chance to read those and moderate this discussion. I'm really glad I didn't go all fangirl on everybody. But
yeah, you were a little fangirl, Dorsey, I gotta say.
A little bit. It happens.
No, it was awesome. Thank you all so much. And let's do it again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.